Thank you for tuning in to Macroview Television, and welcome to a brand new edition of the Taiwan Outlook, the program that lets you see the different faces and hear the different voices of Taiwan. I'm your host, Rick Wu. As we know, international relations and developments among the nations are very important to the continued growth and vitality of Taiwan. And on today's program, we're delighted to have Dr.严震生, who's currently the director of the Institute of International Relations at National Zhengzhi University, to talk about the recent international developments and their impact on Taiwan. Dr. Yen, welcome to the program.
Dr. Lu, how are you? Glad to be here.
Okay, it was a pleasure to have you on the program. As we know, you are one of the well-known experts on international relations in Taiwan, and there's been a lot of international developments since the beginning of the year. Let's start with something a little closer to what happened in just the last few weeks, which was the assassination or the death of Osama bin Laden. And this is something, of course, that the United States will declare as a milestone in the continued fight against terror. And how would you think such an event has impacted relations on the international level? And what would be the impact on Taiwan?
I think the first one is really the U.S. and Pakistani relations.
Okay.
Right now, each one is pointing finger at each other. We have Pakistan saying United States violate its sovereignty, and then United States felt that it was cheated by Pakistan for so many years. Almost like double dipping, getting money from the U.S. and not telling where bin Laden is. So American senators, American government, very upset with Pakistan and swear to cut off foreign assistance. But if United States, has this worsening relation with Pakistan, and then Pakistan return to be closer to China, then it will change the geopolitical outlook of the region. So that's, I think, the first impact. The second one probably is, if bin Laden is finally, executed, and then United States might have an opportunity right now to justify its withdrawal from Afghanistan. So far, we don't know whether they would do it or not. At least from Obama's point of view, Iraqi war is an unjust war. Afghanistan war is a just war because, the September 11 event. But now, with Osama bin Laden being executed, and then you have an opportunity for the United States to withdraw troops from Afghanistan. They already did in Iraq, which means United States will have a lot of flexibility in terms of their options of placing troops around the world. We know mostly people will say United States may be able to fight 2.5 war. Iraqi and Afghanistan, those were 2. So United States was really constrained by those. But now they have this flexibility. Who knows? They might have stronger presence in the Western Pacific. Maybe Libya, they can do something. But at least they have this option and flexibility now.
Okay. What would you think that would do, with the death of bin Laden, what would that do to President Obama's standing in the United States, especially to have a re-election coming up?
Yeah, I just got back from the U.S. 2 weeks ago, and there were a lot of conservatives in American electorate not happy with Obama. Remember when he first came to power, he went to Europe, went to Middle East, Turkey and Egypt. He apologized for this unilateral approach of President Bush foreign policy. And then, condemning the Iraqi war and withdraw troops from Iraqi war, but made no advance in Afghanistan. So a lot of conservatives saying, America is losing its prominent position in the world. They felt that America is truly in decline. In addition to the economy, of course, economy, is not Obama's fault, but at least from the military strategic point of view, it seems like America's, we call hegemony is in decline. But with the death of bin Laden, I think Obama somehow has restored, some of the support. So looks like he's going to have a much easier path for re-election.
Okay, and let's pull the focus back home. With the continued war on terror, what is the role for Taiwan? We know that our government has played some role in the last, decade or so on the war on terror. But what's the, continued, role that we have in this global fight against terrorism?
Of course, we have close relation with the United States. And in the past, we have especially played targets like AIT or any kind of symbol in Taiwan that might be target for the terrorist attack under protection. We try to drill, but the most effective way is to prevent the terrorists from coming into Taiwan. So I think with improved intelligence, with improved exchange of information with the United States and with other countries, I think we can try to enforce our custom much better, border control. Those will help us. And even though we ourselves are not any target of the terrorism, but because of the closer relations we have with the United States, sometimes I think the terrorists would do something like this. Remember, the first, big American attack actually was outside the United States, was in Kenya. American embassy in Kenya, the bombing by bin Laden caused more than 200 people dead. Those mostly are local people, local high. So the same thing, I think, with American presence in Taiwan, they need to have great security. Otherwise, they, if they're soft on that, then they can easily become targets.
Okay. Another focus since the beginning of the year is the development in Africa. You're also one of the leading experts on African affairs. And we look at, the situation in places like Libya, in Egypt, and certainly the ongoing turmoil in Libya. Certainly made us wonder, what's going to happen next, especially given the fact that the ongoing so-called the Jasmine Revolution is still, spreading out throughout the region. So what is your observation on that?
Oh, first, I think if we look at the Jasmine Revolution, and we want to go back to look the third wave of democracy, starting from the late 70s in Southern Europe, starting with Spain and Portugal, and then later spread to Latin America in the early 80s, and then to Asia in the late 80s, and then to the Eastern Europe, finally to Sub-Saharan Africa in the early 1990s. But there is a region, the Middle East, the Arabic world, which is totally immune from this third wave of democracy, except Israel. The whole Middle East is not democratic. But there are some changes in the past decade, like Islamic countries like Turkey, Indonesia, they are democracy. So at least we cannot say Islam and democracy are not compatible. Those can be compatible. And now, if any Arabic country become democratic, then we can say the Arabic civilization and democracy can be compatible. But in the past, we know it's almost like these two are not compatible because there's not a single Arabic country becoming democratic. And now we don't know whether there will be, but at least Tunisia offers some hope. And then we have Egypt is trying to change. And then you have Yemen and other countries doing the same thing. So hopefully, we can really prove democracy is a universal value. Otherwise, say, well, it is universal, but not applicable to the Arabic world.
But what is exactly, throughout these regions, all these, Jasmine revolutions taking place, what is exactly that people want? Do they want more voice and participation in the decision-making process?
Well, I think a lot of countries, if we don't pay attention, their leaders have been in power for so long, and nobody even know. I always give tests of some of the African leaders. I ask my student, and I say, have you heard of this, leader? Never heard of it. I said, he was in power for 40 years. He has been in power for 40 years, and all the so-called, intelligent people in Taiwan never heard of him. He will stay in power for more years until some people in Taiwan learn his name. So you're justifying his continuation in power. But there are all this long dynasty almost from Togo, from Egypt, and then you have Tunisia, and then you have like Gabon, a lot of countries.
Yes.
Libya's leader, Gaddafi, in power more than 42 years. Even if Gaddafi, when he first came to power, he was very concerned, implementing great programs to help the, poor people. And Libya still have very good health care. Libya has good elementary school education. But after 40 years in power corrupts. Absolute power, absolute corruption. So you have nepotism, you have corruption. So that's one thing people are complaining. And remember, Tunisia, Libya, Egypt are among the top countries in Africa. So it's not like people are so desperate. They have to go to streets. But there is a theory called revolution of the rising expectation.
Okay.
I think people are looking for better, especially the Mediterranean, North African country. I think a lot of time, remember French President Sarkozy considered them to have a Mediterranean Union. Okay. So you're not comparing to sub-Saharan African country. No. You're supposed to compare to the Italians, the Greece, the European countries. So by looking at that, there are a lot of room for improvement. Okay. So protest is, of course, it's going to happen.
Yeah. Dr. Yen, we have about a minute left in this part of the program. And my final question for, the first part is, you have this analogy of using the Baseball Hall of Fame to describe the leaders in Africa. Would you mind elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, actually, I want to call them, the African President Hall of Shame.
Oh, okay.
Because they have been in power for too long. But there are reasons, because first African felt that, the founding fathers are the big man. Okay. If you don't have the big man, with the ethnic cleavages, with religious divide, people worry about instability.
Of course.
So you need a big man to kind of like stabilize the country. But once you have this big man, you get used to, you felt they are, indispensable. That's not the case.
No.
But there are cases like Ivory Coast. We know recently, civil war, you have controversy in the presidential election. But for the first 33 years, under one man's rule, the best place in Africa, the capital is Abidjan, is called Little Paris.
Yes.
So there are cases to prove the longer some of the presidents stay, even though not a lot of democracy, but stability.
Okay.
So that's the reason a lot of people justify their dictatorial rule in the name of stability.
Yes, that's right. Okay. We're going to take a short break on our program, and when we come back, we will continue our conversation with Dr.严震生, who's currently the director of the Institute of International Relations at National Zhenji University. I'll see you in just a few minutes. Welcome back to the second segment of today's program here on the Taiwan Outlook. I'm your host, Rick Wo. We will continue our conversation with Dr.严震生, who is currently the director of the Institute of International Relations at National Zhenji University. Dr. Yen, we know that the year 2015 is the final year for the development goal of the Millennium Development Goals project. And that was something that was, of course, passed by 189 member states in the United Nations in September of 2000. What is the state of the Millennium Development Goal project, and how much further do you think that the countries around the world need to pull their resources together and try to achieve the goals that were specified in the Millennium Development Declaration?
Okay, last year, 2010. The United Nations published almost like a midterm report, even though it's 10 years, two-thirds into, and they look at some of the programs, the focus of the program, and found that, in terms of improvement of women's position in the society, that has, met the goal. And in terms of little girls' education, beyond secondary school, also improve a lot. But there are some problems of agriculture, the access to clean water, and then the public health issue. So some of them are not, meeting their goal. So I think the report so far, if you talk about a report card right now, it's mixed. But I think there are positive things, means at least when you are putting your sight on these issues, you can actually achieve. Putting some money in there, it helps. Africa is a more vibrant community right now and has much potential for growth, but still there are issues in terms of public health issues, and then in terms of lack of clean access to the clean water. Those are still worrisome. But in terms of human resources development, I think that has changed a lot.
Among the problems that we still face in the Millennium Development Goal Project, what do you think that most of the countries who signed up for this program, are they fully aware of these problems? Are they willing to do something about it? Or they just say, we're about 4 years away, let's just get it over with?
No, I think most countries want to improve. I mean, no country want to, every country want to at least halve their poverty, right? Want to, improve their, we call life expectancy, and then, educating people. Which sometimes people say, why dictators want to educate people? I said, even dictators want to brainwash their people, and the people need to know how to read in order to be brainwashed. So in a way, all those projects will help African countries. Mostly they welcome, clean water, improvement in agriculture, food production. So those are, I think, every leader will welcome. But with only 4 years left, I think some of the countries might not be able to reach the goal. But still, it's a good thing that the United Nations, the international community, put their focus on this, and hoping that Africa will not be left out. We know in the 1970s and 80s, Asia developed, and then you have Latin America in the 1990s also developed. And then people look at all the developing world, including South Asia, Middle East. Probably Sub-Saharan Africa is the only region that has not catch up with the other regions. So right now, it is an opportunity by dealing with their fundamental problems, and then they can concentrate later on other development.
We also understand that China joined the declaration in the Millennium Development Goal Program to assist their allies in Africa. On the international relations level, Dr. Yen, do you think China has other purposes in mind in terms of making that declaration?
I think China can always justify its assistance to Africa, starting from 1963 when Premier Zhou Enlai visited Africa. And at the time, they declared they're going to provide assistance to Africa, even though China itself was a very poor country, and then later it was involved in Cultural Revolution. But they had this, I call, ideological foundation way back in the 1960s, and then 1982 when Zhao Ziyang visited Africa, also talk about assistance. So China can claim that it has always wanted to, provide assistance to Africa. And right now, in the 2000s, people say, China is only into Africa for resources, for precious metal, for energy, for petroleum. But China can go back to say, we were here before, even when we were poor. In the 1960s, they went to Tanzania and Zambia to help build Tanzan Railway. So in that case, yes, they are today for energy resources. No doubt about that. For job, for market, for cheap raw material, for exporting of goods to Africa. But they can also claim they are doing all this as well to justify their presence. So to me, I think it's easier for Western countries to accuse China of being
having ulterior motive.
Basically in the new imperialists in Africa. But Western countries have not done well before, so it's very difficult for them to pointing finger. But China does have, this material motive, motivation to go into Africa. But at the same time, they have enough resources to also to provide assistance to make their presence in Africa look more welcome.
Okay. We also understand that out of the 53 African countries, we only have diplomatic ties with four of them. And the fact of the matter remains is that although we did not sign in the Millennium Development Goal project because we're not a member of the United Nations, but we have done something, provide assistance to at least to these 4 diplomatic allies of ours in Africa. What are some of the things and projects that we have been doing to help these African countries to conform to the MDG project goals?
Okay, first of all, when Ma Ying-jeou's government came to power in 2008, I think there was a review about our foreign assistance.
Okay.
And then passed, I think there is a new approach that we will adhere to the Paris Declaration on International Assistance, which means we're going to follow the international guideline in providing assistance. Of course, Millennium Development Goal, part of our assistance program. So we are, providing basic, like, dealing with the malaria problem in Sao Tome. We are trying to have hospitals in, different taking care of the medical care. And then also in terms of food production, our agricultural assistants are still helping. So right now, with, I call diplomatic truce with China, actually provide us a real opportunity, not focusing on political ties. In terms of personal tie with political leaders, helping his party to get re-elected, we can concentrate on people's welfare, providing assistance. Because we don't have to worry about diplomatic competition from China. So we are truly helping people, providing the kind of needs that they really would like to receive. Instead of the interests of the leader. So with a guideline, we follow the Paris Declaration of Assistance, and then with our, side on the Millennium Development Goal, I think, we're doing I would call a normal assistance program now than before.
All right. And Dr. Yen, do you think that based on the foundation of relations that we have with these African allies, are there ways or possibilities that maybe we can develop it further in areas like commerce, in areas like education and cultural exchanges that maybe will help to substantiate these relationships with the African allies?
We have a lot of young people who are interested in voluntary works, and in the summer they will go to Africa to do a lot of work. Tsinghua University have students going to Ghana to help them set up remote teaching program using satellite. And so we have a lot of people who are interested in going to Africa. And in terms of exchange of education students, a lot of students are willing to go. But the problem is our parents. Our parents, would not want their kids to venture into Africa. And we have students interested in becoming exchange students, and then parents say no. So I think the biggest change need to be done is around our, among our parents who need to have a different look. I told my student, I said, if you can go to Africa, work in the summer there, and I think most of the multinational company will consider you to be very employable because you're willing to go out of your comfortable zone and working in different places. Those are the ones will be highly sought after by international company. So it helped them. They can market themselves with those kind of experiences. Of course, their original intent was really nice. Should be lauded, should be commended.
And also the fact that we need to have some time to educate our parents, so make sure that they let their children to take on these very meaningful undertakings. We're going to take another break on our program, and we will continue, and we're going to continue this conversation with Dr.严震生, who's currently the director of the Institute of International Relations at the National Zhenji University. I'll see you in just a few minutes. Welcome back to our program here on the Taiwan Outlook. I'm your host, Ray Guo, where we'll continue our conversation with Dr.严震生, who's currently the director of the Institute of International Relations at the National Zhengzhi University. Dr. Yen, let's look ahead to the year 2012. As we know, this is a very important year in terms of political changes. We're going to have elections for both the presidential election and also for the legislative election in Taiwan, and also the case applies in the United States, as they will elect possibly a new president in November of 2012. Given the fact that these very important elections are coming up in both Taiwan and the United States, what would you think, in your observation, are the key issues in both of these elections?
Okay, I think in Taiwan, the debate will be economically, we are becoming closer to China.
Yes.
Is this really going to be an advantage for Taiwan, taking opportunity of the Chinese market and then propel our economic growth? Or will our economy becoming too dependent on China? And then what happen if China economy suffer any setback?
Okay.
It will hurt us.
Okay.
And also, if we do have this interdependence, then will China use any kind of economic sanction in the future if politically they cannot achieve their goal?
Okay.
I think China will not do it.
Okay.
But this over-dependence on Chinese market, would that be a problem? In the past, we have a over-dependence of American market. One time, United States represent 50% of our export market. Right now, only 10%.
Okay.
China and Hong Kong together, 40%.
Yes.
So people say maybe that 40% was originally the American export, right?
Yes.
It's the same, indirect trade. But at the time, American market economy suffer. We say Americans sneeze, Japan have a cold, we have a pneumonia. Yes. So it's a similar thing. But at least people would say United States is more friendly to Taiwan than China. But China, I think, personally, if they want to win over Taiwan, they will never do any economic sanction.
No.
Secondly, they will continue try to yield some benefit.
Okay.
I know so far the result might not be pleasing to China because the first one, if we look at the Taiwan identity issue,
okay.
We have less people identify with Chinese, more identify with Taiwanese, even with the relaxation of relations in the past 3 years. Secondly, people who support unification have not increased, even with China's becoming stronger and then, treating Taiwan, with greater respect than before, still, okay? So I personally think in order for China to win Taiwan, they have to become democratic, they have the greater respect for human rights. Those are the value, at least right now we share with the U.S., not with China. So economically, we are very close to China. Okay. But in terms of our democratic value, human rights, we are closer to the United States. So I think in Taiwan, the voters will have to decide, if we want to shift away from China, and then economically we're going to suffer setback, are we willing to do that? Having a lower level of standard of living, or are we willing to take the risk, or hoping that maybe China will change in the future? So that's the choice in Taiwan. In the U.S., yes, we will have a presidential election in November. I think the economy will still be the issue. Okay. And then the role of government in the United States, that's always the big issue. Democratic belief, the government can be part of the
marketplace.
Yeah. And also the agent of change, including the healthcare issues and other things, regulating the economy. But for the Republican Party, they want deregulation, they don't want government in the economy. But then you have problem in 2008 when we have the financial crisis, which is because of lack of regulation. So Obama, again, traditional Democrat with great social welfare program, which will be a target of the Republican. But when the Republican attack, the government's intervention or interference in the economy, Republican cannot justify their attack because they were the one who caused the problem. So that would be an issue. And then, of course, After Bin Laden, I think foreign policy would be easier. But in the United States, they will always debate about the rise of China and how the relative decline of the United States. How can United States research or reinvent itself to be more, the hegemonic power? So that would be an issue.
Okay.
But in addition to Taiwan and U.S., you also have change of leadership in China.
Yes.
And then at the end of the year, South Korea is going to change its leader.
Exactly.
Russia is going to have an election. In Japan, we know every year they change leader.
Yeah.
So 2012, I think almost every country in the region, in this Asian Pacific region here, Northeast Asia, will see leadership change. And that really will have an impact on the political development here.
Okay, and also very recently we had the elections in Singapore.
Yeah.
And that was the first time the ruling party, the People Action Party, received the lowest amount of votes, and also the opposition gained 6 seats out of the total of 87 seats. And I think that was also a milestone.
Well, used to be opposition could only win some single-member district. But Singapore has this we call group district.
That's right.
This group district is trying to say, we have to accommodate the minority. So when you put together a group district, in addition to the Chinese Singaporean, you have to have minority like Malaysian or Indian. So when you put together a group of candidates, they have to look good. That's the reason opposition have a difficult time to compete in the group district. So this time, the first time you have a breakthrough, that opposition actually won a group district, which means the whole team has been acceptable by the voters. So that's a new breakthrough.
Yeah, that's a big step forward. And looking at the cross-strait relations, as you mentioned, there's been a lot of progress, especially in the economic area in the last 3 years. But given the fact that as we continue to see improvements in cross-strait relations, that people often talk about possibly one of the most sensitive issues in cross-strait relations is the U.S. arms sale to Taiwan. And this is something, of course, in the United States, because the Taiwan Relations Act, that will continue no matter who's in charge in the White House. And how would you think that would change the diameters and also the parameters of the relations between the three sides, the U.S., China, and Taiwan?
I think China will always claim, according to the August 17 communique, United States cannot sell quantitatively or qualitatively more advanced weapons to Taiwan. But China has also increase its military budget, improve its defense program. So United States will say, if you stay the same as 1982, then of course we will not do it. Okay. But now you are moving forward, and then so of course Taiwan should also have sufficient defense capability to protect ourselves. So that's, I think, the argument can be justified. And then the question is, China of course will protest, but United States will try to sell, and we will try to buy. I think we will go through this routine every time there's an arms sale. The important thing is to convince China, saying if Taiwan can buy weapons from the United States, and then the government is more comfortable to negotiate with China without this kind of defense capability, people in Taiwan will worry that the government might sell out Taiwan. So it is if they believe in negotiation, if they believe in political dialogue, it is in the interest even of Beijing government to see Taiwan have some defense capability so we can continue to talk. Otherwise, I mean, people in Taiwan would not feel comfortable. Weaken Taiwan, militarily. Nobody wants to talk to Beijing. So that's, I think, the argument we would try to win Beijing over. And I think Washington, D.C. should also tell Beijing the same thing. Okay.
Finally, for this part of the program, Dr. Yen, we understand, as you mentioned earlier, that China is also going through a political transition in the year 2012 to 2013. It's likely that Mr. Xi Jinping will assume the top spot, both in the party and in the military. And given the fact that there is the ongoing transition in China as well, how would you think that maybe in the first half of 2013, when everything settles down, the cross-strait relations, at that time, what is your personal projection?
Well, people will expect Xi Jinping, who was the party secretary of Fujian province for many years and has some understanding of Taiwan issues and dealt with Taiwan business people in Fujian area, will have a better understanding. But I think the first few years he might still just want not to make any mistake.
Of course.
But at the same time, if Taiwan we are not provoking China, then will be no problem.
Okay.
But if we have if the DPP came to power, if they try to provoke China, and then a new leader almost have to respond. Otherwise, he will lose his credibility.
Exactly.
So I personally think if we have a DPP government, if a new leader came to power in China in 2012-13, we should try not to provoke, because a new leader
may be forced.
May be forced to compel to respond.
We're going to take a final break on our program, and we will come back. We will continue our conversation with Dr.严震生, who is currently the director of Institute of International Relations at National Zhengzhi University. I'll see you in just a few minutes. Welcome back to the final part of today's program here on the Taiwan Outlook. I'm your host, Ray Guo. We will continue our discussions with Dr.严震生, who's currently the director of the Institute of International Relations at the National Zhengzhi University. Dr. Yen, we understand that you have been researching and teaching in the area of international relations for many, many years. You have, of course, taught many, many students. And continue to do so. And what would be your word of advice or recommendation to younger people who are watching our program today, who might be interested in the study of international relations and also possibly a career, like yours, in teaching or researching on international relations?
Okay. First of all, I have to say I'm one of the luckiest professors in Taiwan. I have taught in Tsinghua University, Zhengzhi University, and then National Taiwan University. So all the top students. I'm very lucky to teach all those. And the most interesting thing, I think, is this semester in my National Taiwan University African politics class. I have taught African politics for many years. Never have so many students taken the class.
Really?
So maybe it's Gaddafi. Maybe it's the Jasmine Revolution. So suddenly, this is the elective. So I have over 50 students teaching
very good. Yes.
and taking the class. So this is the first, and I can see there are interests. Sometimes we will say, are you going to offer an African politics class? What happens if nobody is taking? But if you don't, then there will never be student be interested in this. So chicken or egg, which one is first? So I think I try, and now I can see some greater interest, which prove that Taiwan students are interested. But I have to say, media is not very helpful in terms of this. If you go to places like, in East Asia, China CCTV has a 24 hours program. A lot of they're discussing international issues all the time. And then you have NHK, you have Ali Lam from Korea, you have
Channel News Asia from Singapore.
Phoenix from Hong Kong. They're all doing this, and we are the only one. We claim we want to go international, but don't have a lot of coverage on international news. So that's one big problem.
Of course.
So the student, at least they have the website, so they can access. In addition to traditional like CNN or BBC, you can also try other channels who provide you a very balanced view. I recommend students to access channel like newspaper like Christian Science Monitor. Very few people know it, but it's a great one. And then some of the African website provide you different story. Of course, Al Jazeera and from Qatar will also be a good one for students. So access different sources, so you can have a balance of view and try to just to learn. I myself pick up a lot of interest of international things, even when I was in high school. Okay. I was reading history or geography, and then at the back there's a glossary of, like the original terms. So I begin to memorize some of them. Okay. And if you only read Chinese material, you can be very knowledgeable,
of course,
but you cannot carry out a conversation. I'll give you one example. We all know Japanese Prime Minister. Okay, in Chinese we call 兼职人.
Yes.
But if you talk about 兼职人, even Japanese don't know who he is.
Exactly.
You have to know he's Mr. Khan. So Kanato. So by reading more international news, then you can actually carry out conversation and discuss issue with other people. So I think that's very important. Of course, reading books always help, especially history books. Right. If you don't know history, you don't know present.
No.
I think always reading history, why, the Middle Eastern conflict, why Israeli and Palestinians, you have to go back to thousands of years. Okay. So history is always very helpful to understand international relations.
Okay. One thing about, teaching international relations in Taiwan is often being the fact that, one of the disadvantages, often being the fact that in the last 2 or 3 decades, Taiwan has been somewhat marginalized internationally, and we're not considered a major international political player, and we don't command the kind of status that's more commensurate with our economic strength. And given the fact that, under President Ma Ying-jeou, there's been a lot of efforts in trying to make Taiwan more international, more regionally integrated, do you think that will help, in terms of stirring up interest among the younger people to try to pursue the study of international relations and possibly a career in international affairs, whether serving as a diplomat, as a professor, or working for multinational corporations? Would you think that's helpful?
Well, I think, we need to be very pragmatic. In the past, we talk about going back to the international community. We're focusing on, return to the United Nations.
Okay.
But our focus is only on our membership, and then after September, when we failed the bid, there's no coverage of what's going on this year's UN agenda. And then if you look at the college, I think that's even a worse proof of that. We have the textbook for United Nations. Written in 1990. That's the only textbook available. Okay. And we have not, if we are interested in United Nations, I think we should update.
Of course.
The government can also, just provide funding, asking, people to write about the United Nations. We don't. The funny thing was, we have students who initiate at the participation of the UN model United Nations.
Okay.
So more and more students are going to different regions, or go even, in Taiwan we have this model United Nations, and then we're going to the U.S., go to New York headquarters. Okay. I was with the students from Taiwan in 2004. They were, in the General Assembly where Taiwan was kicked out.
Of course.
But they were there, just being part of this Model United Nations program. So they are being exposed to those. There are so many channels they can do it. In terms of non-governmental organization, we can participate. As long as our young people are willing, and the government is committed to the substantial part, not the ceremonial part. There are a lot of things we can do. Like APEC, we still have a lot of programs we are very good at, like the small and medium size enterprises, which we can offer so much. But every time Taiwan's media focus, who is going to be the special envoy for APEC, instead of all the substantial issue. Look at, if you go abroad at the airport, there's a APEC line, right? So which means we are part of this thing. But we can do a lot to strengthen our presence there. instead of focusing on those ceremonial things, like how far he is standing away from President Obama,
yes.
or did he carry out a conversation with Hu Jintao? We are focusing on those very superficial things. There are so many substantial things our young people can do, and there are opportunities. I think government need to pay attention.
Okay. Finally, for our program today, that Dr. Yen, you mentioned earlier about the different international perspectives on developments, and the interpretations are often very important. You have the NHK, you have Phoenix Television, Channel News Asia in Singapore, and also CCTV in China, of course. Do you think that in the future, maybe that our government in Taiwan should also try to set up Taiwan's interpretations of the developments on the international level? For example, what happened with Osama bin Laden? What does that mean for Taiwan? Would you think that is one area that we should look forward to and try to do more?
Well, I think, since I came back to Taiwan some 15 years ago, I proposed this for a long time. I sent proposal, and people said, well, if you're interested, why don't you raise some money and then, trying to, put together a program. Of course, as a scholar, it would be difficult for me. But coming back to this, I think, we can have, starting from a weekend program, letting the tourists, the business people who stay in the hotel at least have access to what's going on here. What's the Taiwan perspective? We can have a This Week in Taipei, this week, Taiwan and the world, and understanding Taiwan's perspective. I think most people are interested in finding out how we see China.
Of course.
Because they don't want to buy this official propaganda type of view from China.
No.
But we have so much access. We talk, and sometimes I think China liberal people would like to see their view being expressed through us, to the outside world. So we have a golden opportunity here. With the rise of China, we can represent this community, giving a different perspective. So yes, I would like to see that happen. But so far, with China even have a French station, I think we should have one in English at first.
At least, yes. Certainly, it's a pleasure having you on the program, Dr. Yen, today. I certainly want to wish you all the best in your professional and personal endeavors in the future.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure.
Okay. Thank you for watching our program today. I'll see you next time on MacroView Television. Thank you.